Ooh, we actually have some Predaplant Dracotail. We also have access to Yubel and Friends and more Doomz. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more Oscar. You know, this kind of caught my attention, honestly. I'm happy to see that players are leaping into the Predaplant deck, and they're actually giving this a test, because, you know, the way that this little package is being kind of built around in decks is actually kind of cool. And obviously, you know, it gives access to the Predaptant here, which is another very good card for you. Now, you're probably just looking at this and you're like, well, aren't we just kind of coping on the loss of Dracotail package cards at this point? Yeah, probably. But we're not going to take away, you know, a 4th place finish from this deck, because it's still performed. It was still able to do a Grand Slam finish, even with like a minimalistic build-up package. Now, one cool thing I do appreciate about this deck, though, is instant fusion is searchable. That's right. Being able to have this card be a card that we're able to access within the deck to help us out is really, really good. I also do see we have all of the Dracotail traps in here now. I think we're now at a point with the limitations that this list has that you have to play the extra Dracotail trap, because you now have to kind of spin these resources back to the deck to always constantly make sure that you have them in rotation. Because not having those in rotation is going to be enough to kind of make this deck fall apart, and that's not really something that you want to be left behind on. You know, you need to make sure that this deck is seeing all of the solutions and answers that you need to be provided, so you know you're able to do your thing. But you have 3 different packages within the deck, which I think makes this a pretty decent challenger. You know, Dracotail's place in the meta is going to be a rough one for a little while, but I think players are going to get this figured out probably pretty quickly. Next up here, oh boy, Yubel and Friends. This was not a surprising deck to see, you know, working still. What I think the surprise was, you know, somebody actually still chose to play this. But you got to remember, you still have access to the entirety of the Fiendsmith package. So it kind of comes down to, you know, why do we not want to try to play this deck? Well, the answer is 46 cards, honestly. A lot of people in this community just don't like, you know, having too many cards in their deck, and you got people that are just going crazy. Also, who let this duelist have the ultimate? Honestly, this is kind of funny. One, I'm actually happy to see that the ultimate nightmare is actually seeing play. But I also think this is just kind of the result of the meta. Now, having access to the ultimate nightmare means, you know, you've got one more body that you're able to bring into rotation a lot more consistently, which is just going to kind of help you when you're building those boards, which is kind of what this deck wants to do, right? You just need to make sure, all right, as the Fiend stuff's looping through and, you know, Nightmare Throne's pumping up, you know, these monsters, you're doing your job. That's why I think having access to one of these isn't necessarily going to hurt the deck. If anything, if you're really worried about something kind of falling apart, then, I mean, like, you could cut the brick, but you're playing 46 cards to prevent you from even having this come up as a bad issue. So, kind of take that with where you will, all right? Like, your deck is made in the image that, you know, this isn't going to come up. Also, Buio and the Mutiny in the Sky, both coming up and being very, very, very good cards is kind of nice. So I like that. I like the consistency that we're kind of getting here. Also, Mercurium in the side deck. All right, next up here, we get access to more Doomz. Now, you might have noticed there's been kind of like a Doomz revolution happening, kind of background of the format, where a lot of players have just realized, oh, hey, you know, Doomz is actually just a very competitive deck now. You know, we're able to do all of these cool new little play lines with the deck, and we're able just to get a lot more success with them. Yes, yes, and absolutely yes. As long as this deck is able to, you know, kind of get established and do its thing, it's very good. Now, obviously, you are playing one Medius just to be able to get the one Power Patron Doomz into rotation. You've also got access to the triple of the Dracotail, and you're playing the one Vidolium. This list is not trying to do the non-finito Nervito shenanigans, where you're trying to get access to the recapture model, just to kind of be able to, use that piece to kind of help the deck out. I did appreciate that. That was actually kind of nice to be able to see, the consistency being pushed behind that, but I don't know. Kind of like that. We also do have triple dimensional fissure in the side deck, which is great. You have Solemn Warnings. We also have the Thrust the Illusion Gate, and you got a couple of extra little open slots here that you're able to kind of work with. That's one thing I like about Doomz. While the main force of the deck is pretty much locked in, and it's like, all right, cool, I know where we're going with this, I know where our options are. Most of the people that have figured this deck out will say that, it's very, very strong in that. Also remember, you get access into Regulus off of Merrymaker into Sorass, which is pretty good. So congratulations, everybody. You've been here long enough to actually see Doomz getting multiple models. Some standard branded for you. This is kind of cool. So this isn't even branded. This is Dogmatika. The Blazing Cartier. Huh? This is kind of interesting, honestly. So what happens when you kind of gut out the more branded package, but then you can rely on things like Ecclesia and Fleur de Lis to be able to pop onto the field, control the opponent. You now have access to Fallen of the White to bring out Ecclesia and the Dark Dragon to beam on into, some of your other little consistency pieces that you need, the Blaze Cartesia, the Guiding Quem. Suddenly, we can just start fusing up on the opponent's turn. We can get the Mirror Jade access during the opponent's turn. We don't have to bulk down on things like Branded Fusion, for example. And the icing on the cake that makes this deck even more chaotic is the fact that Secret Village of the Spellcasters is up front and center here as an absolutely cataclysmic blowout card against the opponent. I guarantee you that if you're riding into the sunset here and you're like, okay, cool, how is this working? You're just going to slap the Secret Village on the table and you're just going to win the game. Like, right then and there. This card is and will be one of the most disgusting cards that will be kind of going forward within the meta. And if your deck can access it, you best be bringing it to the table. Like, it's crazy to me that we live in a time right now in this meta that players might be looking at Secret Village and going, nah, I don't really think I want to play that. And it's like, why though? Why would you just not want to play one of the biggest potential blowout cards that you can have just to be able to, make it work? So that's an interesting topic there in itself, but, time will tell with that one. And then we have more Enneacraft. It's still really funny to me that the Enneacraft community figured out, oh, hey, our deck just has massive access to being able to mess up Cool Tunes, because one whale resolves, down goes their whole field. They're not playing the game, man. And as much as you guys want me to be like, well, is the whale really that important? Yeah, the whale resolving to lock down in three things on the opponent's field will just win you games by itself, because that's three less zones that they can rotate. That's key monsters that are going to be face down. Meanwhile, the only thing your deck has to do is la-di-da-di-da, me place, counter onto Pendulum, me going to win game because me going to go ahead and blow up your field, or blow up your life points because of the flipping. It's ridiculous, but it's something that happens. I do find it interesting this deck choosing to play Book of Eclipse or Book of Moon instead of the Sol and Luna. A lot of the other lists I've seen do kind of agree that like Sol and Luna just feels way more impactful. And I mean, like, I guess I get it, but at the same time, I feel like you want the consistency of this deck. You want this deck to be able to, just work out very, very nicely. So I guess we'll see where this goes, but that's what we're dealing with right now. So What do you guys think about today's decks? Please, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I will see your very beautiful faces back here in a day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.